Welcome back to the Scotti-BYTE channel, and this is Scott. So today I wanted to address one of the things that we frequently have to do, and that is to replace a drive that's running out of space. So I want to begin by thanking one of my subscribers by the name of Hassan for gifting me this 4 terabyte NVMe drive. It is a Western Digital Black 4 terabyte drive, and I'm replacing a 2 terabyte drive. So the way that I'm going to do this is I am going to use one of these drive enclosures that is a USB-C drive enclosure, and I'm going to connect it up to my VMS Mist machine, which is a Incus server, and so it is running Ubuntu Server 2404. If you have watched the channel before, you know that one of the programs that I like to use as one of my favorite utilities is RescueZilla. So RescueZilla is an open source program that can be used to either copy or clone disk drives, and it's very easy to use. If you simply go to rescuezilla.com, you can download it and burn it to your, or copy it, I should say. Burn would be the old terminology we might use if we were going to go ahead and create a writable CD or a writable DVD. But in this particular case, most people will be downloading it either to a small USB drive or just a simple USB thumb drive or USB memory stick. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and boot up RescueZilla and see what the steps are to convert from a smaller 2 terabyte NVMe drive to a larger 4 terabyte NVMe drive. Sorry about the small font size here, but I'm directly connected to the console of VMS Mist. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a sudo reboot now, and the BIOS or reset for the BIOS button that I use in order to boot from alternate media, I believe on this system, is in F7. So I'm going to wait for the BIOS splash screen. I'll pound on the F7, and it should give us an option for various boot media, at which point I will boot from the USB media for RescueZilla. So there's the mini forum boot screen, and now that the mini forum boot screen has come up, my RescueZilla media happens to be on the Jet KVM virtual media, so that's pretty much a simulated USB drive. I'll go ahead and hit enter, and it will boot from my RescueZilla on that device. I go ahead and hit enter to select English, and I hit enter to start RescueZilla. Once RescueZilla comes up, we want to choose the option to clone our drive. A clone is an exact copy of one drive to another, and it's not really a usable copy, and we're going to explain that later. You would have to do a clone from a smaller drive to a larger drive for this to work, or a drive of exactly the same geometry. So let's go ahead and click Next. It will go ahead and scan and find the drives. It locates the 2 drives I have out there. The reason it's tagged the first drive as a Sovereign drive is because that is the USB enclosure that I've got for the 4 terabyte drive, which it recognizes it as 3.6 terabytes usable. And then the internal drive right now is a 2 terabyte drive, which is recognized as 1.8 terabytes. That's the one that we want to choose to back up or clone. Now we're going to click Next, and the destination drive will be the one that is in the Sovereign enclosure, the new 4 terabyte drive. We go ahead and click Next. The next screen that comes up gives you the partitions that you're going to clone. Partition number 1 here is the EFI boot partition, and it is formatted FAT32. Partition number 2 is a little confusing because it's only 2 gigabytes, and it is basically a pointer set up for Logical Volume Manager, which is what we're going to have for the server version of Ubuntu, which is what my drive has. And finally, partition 3 is 1.8 terabytes, and that's actually where all the data is stored. So that is fine. I want to copy all 3 partitions. I go ahead and click Next. As a reminder, it says that the source drive is NVMe 0 and 1, and the destination drive is the 3.6 terabyte drive in the Sovereign enclosure, and it's going to clone all 3 of these partitions. I go ahead and click Next. It's going to say, are you sure you want to clone the drive to /dev/SDA ? It says doing so will permanently overwrite the drive or the data on this drive. And of course, that drive is the drive in the USB enclosure. And the answer is yes. So then it will go ahead and begin the cloning operation. So at the end of the RescueZilla clone, I got this error message saying it failed to shut down the logical volume manager volume group. And it seems like it has failed. However, from experience, I can tell you that before when I've done this, it has not actually had a problem. So I'll go ahead and click OK, and you can notice that it did not upgrade or update the grub, but it said that it did successfully restore the images of those particular partitions. And then it goes out and it gives you a little bit of an error about the logical volume manager, which is part of the Ubuntu server. So I'll go ahead and I'll click Next, and then I'll go ahead and I will exit RescueZilla. So having RescueZilla booted means that we don't have the regular operating system on the drive installed in the machine actually booted. And so I'll go ahead and launch gparted here, which is the graphical partition manager for GNOME. And when this comes up, you will see that it is looking at NVMe 0 and 1, which is the original drive inside of the machine. So I'll go down here and select SDA, and SDA is the new 4 terabyte drive that we just cloned over. One of the things about cloning a drive to a larger drive is you still get the drive geometry of the smaller drive. So I'm going to go ahead and click device or /dev/SDA3, which is the root partition, and you notice it says it's 1.82 terabytes because that's what came from the old drive. Then I'll go ahead and right click on this and say resize and move. And then I'll go ahead and drag this out to be the full size of the new disk. I click resize and move, and then I go ahead and click the check mark to execute the operation. It says, are you sure you want to do this? Because there may be a risk of pending loss of data. I'll go ahead and click apply. And so it does that pretty quickly and finishes. So I go ahead and do a close, and it rereads the drive. And as you can see here, we have our 1.05 gigabyte FAT2 or FAT32 EX, or not EXT, but FAT32 EFI partition. And we have our little 2 gigabyte partition. And then we have the root partition, which is actually a logical volume manager partition, and it has a triangle in it letting us know that there is a problem associated with that drive. And that means that our next step is going to be to shut down RescueZilla and then swap in the new 4 terabyte drive, and then we'll reboot. So I'll do a shutdown here, and we'll be back in just a second. So now I pulled the old 2 terabyte drive out of the system and put the 4 terabyte drive into the NVMe slot, and I went ahead and rebooted RescueZilla again. And if I do an LSBLK, it will show that I have NVMe 0NP1, 1P2, and 1P3. And it does correctly say that 1P3 is 3.6 terabytes. However, it shows that the logical volume manager for Ubuntu only sees a 1.8 terabyte disk. So now the trick is going to be to resize the logical volume manager to let it know that that logical volume manager partition has grown. And we can do that with a pv resize /dev /nvme 0n1p3. And that will go ahead and tell us that it has resized or updated one physical volume. And so therefore we should be in better shape now, hopefully. So at this point, if we go ahead and do an lsblk, once again, the good news here is that we've resized that volume, but you're not seeing anything any different. So let's do a vg display command to show the volume group names. And we can see here that we do have a disk that is resizable. And then we can also do an LV display, and it will show us the name of that, which happens to be /dev /ubuntu-vg /ubuntu-lv. So now we have to extend the logical volume by doing an lv extend-l plus 100% of the free space and /dev /ubuntu volume group -ubuntu logical volume. And it says that it has successfully resized. The last step that we need to do is to do a resize 2fs on /dev /ubuntu-vg /ubuntu-lv. And that resizes the file system inside of that logical volume container. And so it came back and told us that it was successfully resized, and it tells us to also run this e2fs ck, which is a logical volume manager file systems check. And this is just as a precaution, but we do, just like they say here, an e2fs ck -f and the name of the volume system, which is /dev /ubuntu-vg -lv. And that will go ahead and do that. It says no such file or directory while trying to open that, and it must be because I am not giving it quite the correct extension. Let's see, what did I do wrong here? Oh yes, /dev boy, I really botched that there. People tell me to leave the mistakes in the videos, so we'll just go ahead and do that. So that should be ubuntu-vg for volume group /ubuntu-lv for logical volume. And then that goes ahead and performs the check. So what this is doing is it's making sure that all the inodes are intact, and it's going ahead and seeing that all the blocks and sizes are mapped correctly. And so I'll go ahead and say, yeah, you can go ahead and optimize this, and it will do that. And so it is performing those operations. This is just to make sure that the newly setup drive has integrity and that we're not dealing with something that may have some file system problems. And here, now that it's completed the file system check, I'm going to go ahead and clear the screen and do an lsblk, and we will see that we do have a 3.6 terabyte NVMe 0N1P3, but that the logical volume inside of it also is 3.6 terabytes. And now if we go back into gparted and look at this particular drive, we'll see that it is up and running, and there are no errors like we saw right after we cloned the drive. Just as a reminder, we cloned a smaller drive to a larger drive, and that does not guarantee that you're changing the size of the drive geometry. So what we had to do from the command line was to enlarge the drive geometry appropriately, and since we were using Logical Volume Manager because this was an Ubuntu server, we had to enlarge the Logical Volume Manager partition and also the file system inside of that Logical Volume Manager partition. At this point, we should be able to reboot our server, so I'll go down here and do a shutdown from RescueZilla and check the reboot option. And here we're watching the reboot process, and it is starting all of the network components, and we're looking for any kinds of errors that we can see during the boot up, and it looks like everything is fine. So it gave us the command prompt, and it's coming out and saying that it is running some of the final pre-boot operations, and so we should be good. Now that we're booted up successfully, let's go ahead and SSH over to my VMS Mist Incus server, and it should log in here just fine. And it came up and said it's running Ubuntu 24.04, which is correct. And we'll do an lsblk command, and the lsblk command will come out and correctly list the size of the drives. After a little while, I came into my Lex console interface, which is the GUI for Incus, and I can see that all 40 of my Incus containers are up and running. And if I scroll down a little bit, it says that drive NVMe 0N1 is a Western Digital Black SN7100 4 terabyte drive, and it has a formatted size of 3.64 terabytes. If you followed my tutorial entitled Incus Containers Step by Step, one of the things that we did was we created a ZFS storage pool in order to store your Incus container information. So even though we resized the drive, if I do a sudo zpool list, you can see here that I have a 686 gigabyte storage pool. I have only currently allocated 149 gigabytes of it, so I have 537 gigabytes free. But what if I wanted to expand this storage pool? In Incus Containers Step by Step, we used a virtual storage pool, and to see where it's stored, you can do a zpool status. And in my particular case, that is a file in /var/lib/incus/dis, and it's called default.img. Before we can enlarge our storage pool, we're going to need to stop all of our containers, and we can do that with an incus space stop --all. Now that all my containers are stopped, I'm going to go ahead and expand the size of my storage pool. And first of all, let's just go up here and do a zpool status as a reminder. And that is the location where the storage pool is. And then let's go up one more step and do a sudo zpool list. And it is 686 gigabytes. So I'm going to go ahead and do a sudo truncate where I specify the size as 500 gigabytes larger than it currently is. And although truncate sounds like you're making it smaller, we're actually making it larger in this particular case. Now that I've performed that command, the next step is going to be to set a feature called auto expand to on. And so we're setting auto expand to on for the default storage pool, whose name is default. And then we're going to go ahead and tell it to expand the storage pool to the new size of the virtual file with this command. And then finally, the last thing that we need to do is to turn auto expand off. And once we do that, if we go back up and do a sudo zpool list again, our storage pool is now 1.16 terabytes in size. And you notice that I did not make that storage pool use all of the space on the disk because I have other things in mind that I may use it for. Now that we've verified that our storage pool is expanded, we can start all of our containers again with an Incus start space -- all, and that will start up all of the containers on the system. Now that all of my containers are once again mounted, I came back into Lex Console and you can see that all 40 containers are up and running. And so now we've done a successful update or upgrade of my Incus server running Ubuntu on a 2 terabyte NVMe to a 4 terabyte NVMe. Although I've done previous tutorials on enlarging a disk in Ubuntu, I thought that just focusing specifically on updating a disk on an Ubuntu server that was an Incus server and all those considerations combined would be something really important. Anyway, that's it for today. Please subscribe and like to the channel, and don't forget to hit your notification bell, and we'll see you next time.